So last time I was testing out the Vulkan and OpenGL performance on a 8 Elite device, and today we will be doing the same test on a older generation flagship. This is a device with a 8 Gen 2. Now, as we all know, the 8 Elite performed incredibly well. That chipset surprised me a lot. It's a monster, and doesn't matter if it's Vulkan or OpenGL, the 8 Elite will run the game perfectly. Although Vulkan does have the Vulkan API in Wuthering Waves currently does have some bugs, as I mentioned before, and we just have to be patient and wait for that to be fixed. Kuro will definitely fix it. We all know that by now. Anyway, the real question is, how will Vulkan perform on a different chipset, on a different device, on an older generation flagship in this case? And I plan to do the same test on a even older device, a device with a Snapdragon 870. That's my plan for the next video, because I kind of want to test out how the API will perform across different device categories. In this case, in my case here, flagships. Now, you guys have also asked me to show how to get Vulkan to run and how to get frame generation to run. Again, I need to mention this. Both are... Now, in the case of the frame generation, it works on the 8 Elite from what I have seen, and it has no bugs on the 8 Elite. But I think it will be buggy on all the other chipsets. And when it comes to Vulkan, I don't really know how it will perform on all devices. So I don't really recommend that you enable those, because bugs are definitely going to happen, and as we have seen, and as you will see in this video, both can be quite buggy if not used on the right device. When it comes to the frame generation, that's pretty much what I'm referring to in this case, because frame generation is buggy. It works on all the generation devices, but it is pretty much buggy, as we will see. In order to enable frame generation, you have to go to the engine ini and pretty much write these 3 different lines in the engine ini. You can copy it and put it or just write it in, both work. AFME means Adreno Frame Motion Engine, and that should be supported by the 8 Gen 1, 8 Gen 1 Plus, 8 Gen 2 and 8 Gen 3. I'm not really sure about the 7 series chipsets, but I'm sure that the latest and one of the newest, well, the last couple of generations of the 8 series Snapdragon chips do have this feature. So if you have these, you may try it, but I know for a fact that it works flawlessly only on the 8 Elite, because I think the older AFME on the older devices is from a previous generation, and it's a different version. So again, this is something that Kuro will have to optimize and make work. They will have to make it work for the older generations as well. This is something that's currently, I would say, working the best on a 8 Elite. I will try frame generation on a Snapdragon 870, which should technically not support it. Now, when it comes to Vulkan, you need to copy these 3 lines. Don't forget the Android device profile that needs to be put in, unless if you don't put this in, it's not going to recognize it. But enabling Vulkan is also pretty easy. You go to the device profile and just write these 4 lines, save it, make sure that you don't have any missed rows or any separated numbers or text and numbers and stuff, and then you just save it, and it should be the game should boot with Vulkan API. Now, okay, so now I'm recording the screen just so that you can see that I'm actually booting from the phone, because I've seen some comments saying, oh, you're playing on a PC. Obviously not. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm actually launching this from a phone now, and last time I haven't really changed anything. I mean, I'm pretty much launching the game from a phone. All these tests have been performed on a phone. Last time it was performed on a S25, this is a S23. Okay, well, let's boot up the game and let's see if... Yeah, it's Vulkan, okay, it's booting in Vulkan, perfect. Now, flashing lights, warning ahead. If you're sensitive to lights, you don't want to look at this, because this is how we know that we have Vulkan, and this is how we know that frame generation is active. If you have frame generation and Vulkan active at the same time, this is pretty much the visual artifact that you get at the moment. And this is pretty much my speculation. The reason why they have software disabled ray tracing, it used to be enabled in the last version, now it's disabled, is because of a problem similar to this. So I'm fairly sure they have disabled it because they know if they keep it there, someone will enable ray tracing and the game will be pretty buggy. So they have disabled it. I can forgive that. It's not ready. Ray tracing is definitely not ready for mobile yet, at least on Vulkan. So we just have to be patient and they will be adding that. But yeah, Vulkan on an older generation obviously works as it should work. And frame generation seems to work as well. Now, how well will frame generation actually work? I will actually test that a lot today. We will be testing out frame generation performance. I want to show you the current bugs that you can expect and the reasons why I would not recommend that you enable this unless you have an 8 Elite device. And obviously we will be testing out the Vulkan performance and OpenGL performance because, again, I think everyone is curious to see how the game will actually work on different devices, on different chipsets with modern API. Again, Vulkan is very fresh in Wuthering Waves. It is buggy. This is definitely not the final performance, not the final version of the performance that we see here. And I personally would not recommend that you turn on Vulkan because you can expect a lot of bugs. Obviously, if you want to try it out, I can't stop you, but I'm just giving you a fair warning that the game is not quite ready for it yet. They have to do a lot of work with it, and there's bugs. And obviously this is not the final Vulkan performance that we see here. Just to make things clear here. Okay. Now, well, we're loading. Now, the one thing that I have noticed, the shaders are compiling something. This didn't happen on the 8 Elite. On the 8 Elite, I could immediately just change the API, basically tell the game to run in Vulkan, and it will automatically just launch the game like nothing happened, and it will immediately go into the game without having to compile shaders. However, on the 8 Gen 2, it seems to be compiling shaders. I did launch the game before, so it's not because I didn't launch the game anytime soon. I launched the game recently. I launched the game quite literally like moments before I started the video to update stuff and to make sure that I don't have anything waiting for me there. But it seems that you might experience the shader compilation now immediately after you do change the API. Maybe that's normal, maybe not. I would guess maybe it's because of the API. Could be the case. However, I haven't experienced this on a 8 Elite. I haven't experienced that on the 8 Elite. With the 8 Elite, I immediately was able to go into the game and no shader compiling, nothing. Just straight up in the game, and I was able to play immediately. And this process can take a while. In this case here, I don't think it's really taking too much time. But this is something that you can expect. I also know that the shader compilation can happen if you don't launch the game for a while, which is normal, or after an update. That also is a possibility. But we are getting to the game slowly, and then we will see how it will look, how it will perform. I mean, am I going to get better performance than the 8 Elite? Now, last time I actually made a joke. I said that there's a chance that the 8 Gen 2 will actually get better Vulkan FPS than the 8 Elite, which would mean that the developers have the older generation flagships in mind, and maybe they have these devices as the as the device in focus. So I think the developers are focusing on the 8 Gen 2 and 8 Gen 3 a lot more than they're focusing on the 8 Elite, which to me honestly is fine. Okay, well, we are in the game. We're getting 60 FPS. That's already better than the 8 Elite. Frame generation off. Now again, flashing light warning. I have to mention that because the game does get quite flashy when you enable the frame generation with Vulkan because it's buggy. But we are getting good FPS, 60 FPS as expected with Vulkan. Now let me go to my old testing area so that we can... I mean, this is pretty much just showing you that the API works and showing you that switching works, that engine ini and device profiling stuff works. Obviously, when I play, I will give the phone the same cooling that I gave the 8 Elite, just to make things fair for both devices. And now, the magic question, frame generation. Am I going to get the same bug as the 8 Elite? I think I will. Yep, we are getting the same bug. Okay, yikes, that's some rave party in Rena City right now. Camellia was smoking that good stuff, you know, and that's what happens. Jokes aside, yeah. Same bug. I mean, it's pretty much same Adreno type of GPU, so you can expect the same problem. Obviously, I mean, that's normal. Same driver, same problem. Obviously expect. Okay, now in order to disable this, you just have to delete the AFME and the stuff that you've written in, and obviously in order to remove Vulkan, you just have to remove what you put there. Just pretty much delete this, and once you do that, it will boot back up in OpenGL, and you will get the old API back to work. It will swap back to default, and let's see. Yep, now it's OpenGL. There it is. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to swap back. It's pretty easy to swap in, depending on what you want to do, obviously. So yeah, and now how will frame generation work? I mentioned already, but frame generation on the 8th Gen 2 currently seems to be also a little bit bugged. The overall colors seem to kind of darken. They seem to kind of lose. It's difficult to explain. It seems like the lightning on the map is gone, which happens only if you turn on frame generation. And the characters also sometimes do flicker as well, which is also again something coming from the frame generation. After all, frame generation currently is only for the 8 Elite. You can enable it on older devices, and I think only for Snapdragon devices. After all, this is called Adreno Frame Motion Engine, so this is something particularly for Adreno GPUs. I have no idea how this will run on an Exynos GPU or a MediaTek GPU. I don't have an Exynos, I don't have a MediaTek, I only have Snapdragon, so I honestly have no clue how this will work on something besides a Snapdragon. I would assume that it would not work. I wish I had a MediaTek to test that, but unfortunately I don't, so I don't recommend that you turn this on unless you have a Series 8 Gen 1 and above Snapdragon. Even with an 8 Gen 1, I wouldn't be turning it on, but definitely a lot less bugs than with the Vulkan enabled. But let's see the frame rate. Am I going to get some good FPS? I already tested this out before. I can tell you, yes, you get 120 FPS on the 8 Gen 2, which is a 2-3-year-old flagship now. So overall, a frame generation will help a lot when it is adapted on a wider scale. And one thing I noticed on the 8 Elite, I didn't notice too much of a input lag. On the 8 Gen 2, I feel the input lag is definitely a little bit more present. Maybe that's because it's a different version of the Adreno Frame Motion Engine. I know the latest is on the 8 Elite. I think on the 8 Gen 2 is the Frame Motion Engine 1. I'm not really sure, but it works and does give some good FPS. Definitely gives some good FPS. We will get higher FPS once I give the device some good proper cooling, because again, I want to do the test fairly for both devices, or for both the devices that I'll be testing out, so cooling has to be the same for both. Okay, so I show you how this works, I show you that it works, and now it is time to start with the test. How will the 8 Gen 2 handle frame generation, and how will the 8 Gen 2 handle Vulkan and OpenGL? So all of my lovely little windows are up and running. We can see the internal temperature, internal frequency of the CPU frequency, the GPU frequency, the temperatures, all of that is obviously on display. This is how a performance test needs to be done. This is how a proper performance test looks. You just don't show some percentages, you pretty much show frequencies, you show the percentage, you show the internal important temperature. Internal temperature is a lot more important than the skin temperature. And you pretty much have all of these things on screen. And most importantly, you need to know what you're talking about, which hopefully I do know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this for over a year for this game, so kind of skilled in that aspect, but we will start with frame generation first, because FPS is definitely an important topic, and this has the potential to help low-end devices, mid-range devices, to massively boost the FPS. However, again, I don't know how it will perform from device to device. I can show you on my devices, 8 Elite, 8 Gen 2 and 870, how it will handle on those. I don't know how it will perform on anything else, but this is, again, a test. So, here we are in the game, on OpenGL obviously. And let me go to the main area first, because I usually start on the main area. So we're getting 100 plus FPS, 120 FPS. However, it is not really stable, and to be honest, I did not expect stable FPS, because officially the 8 Gen 2 does not have this option enabled for this game. So kind of forced to have the option enabled, unlocked if you will. And we do see quite the visual difference in the game. Again, there's a bunch of flicker, there's a bunch of different bugs going on with it enabled. Now, if you were to go and disable it, the overall visuals will definitely go back to normal, and the game will act and perform normally. So this is one thing that you need to keep in mind if you have an 8 Gen 2, for example. If you do turn this on, this is pretty much what you can expect. The device has all the latest drivers, all the latest stuff for it, so if you have the latest drivers, this you can expect. But does it generate frames? That sure does. It sure does. It does generate frames quite well, over 100 FPS. I can see the smoothness immediately, does kick in rather nicely, but some visual artifacts are to be expected. And honestly, if you don't mind the visual artifacts, it could be played this way, but I don't really know what other issues can arise with using the frame generation unofficially. Well, unofficially, I'm not really sure if that's the right term, but on the 8 Gen 2, for example, it does get good FPS, though, over 60 and easily going over to 120. If you have, for example, better cooling, and I have a case on and I've already done a bunch of stuff on the device, so the device already kind of has been warmed up. But we do get some very good FPS, and as we have seen, the 8 Gen 2's GPU is more than capable of getting over 100 FPS on this game. This is something that I have been talking about for months and months now. I've seen a lot of claims made that, the 8 Elite, it's using 80% GPU, it cannot get 60 FPS, it cannot get 120 FPS. Same thing said on the 8 Gen 2, and all of these other tests never include the GPU frequency, which is very important. You can see a significant bump in the GPU frequency of the game when you turn on frame generation. Basically, the GPU usage nearly doubles, which is to be expected, and the overall load also doubles. So this is why showing frequency is extremely important, so you have the whole picture. Well, this is pretty much also what happens on certain maps. I also love how the bug only occurs when you're facing the character from the front, but when you face the character from the rear, from the back, it doesn't have the bug. So I think some of the details on the car, I think it's the eyes. I think the eyes are the what's causing the model to glitch out here. That's pretty funny to see, but the FPS is definitely really good. The FPS is definitely really good. We're getting 90, 98, 99, 100. It does go up and down. Again, it is to be expected. The most important thing is that it actually works. I feel like the GPU did yeah, I think the GPU already throttled, and I expected that to happen. After all, I already did stuff with the device earlier, and I didn't really give it enough time to cool down, I guess. But I thought the cooling will be sufficient. Or actually, you know what? I think I know what's the problem. I think the problem is my little temperature window on the far left side of the screen. When I turn that off, I think the frequency will bump up. Usually the bug with the current, with the overall, I think with the game actually, if you have that on, something happens and it doesn't want to use the GPU a lot. But we do get 60 FPS though, and above, which is already good enough, I would say. If you get over 60 FPS with throttling, with frame generation on, that's already a huge boost, because usually devices, when they start to throttle, they get like 20-30 FPS, but if you can get like 60 FPS with throttling, then that's already, I would say, more than enough for the vast majority of devices out there. However, I will definitely turn off the little temperature window, and then we will see if the GPU starts to be utilized a lot more. But we do get good FPS, and that's already a fantastic improvement over having no frame generation on. And with 60 FPS, I would say I don't really feel that much delay now. I'm on a controller, I would feel the delay, but now I feel like the delay is much less. So this could potentially be a very good combination for performance. If you don't want to experience throttling, then frame generation can actually help a lot with that. And I'm myself, I'm not a big fan of fake frames and frame generation, but in some instances, it can actually be very helpful, especially with throttling. If you can actually get 60 FPS in the worst case scenario, that's, I would say, really solid. On the 8 Elite, it gets flawless 120 FPS in this case. With or without throttling, that thing gets 120 FPS. The 8 Elite is a very scary chip, not gonna lie. I say scary, that thing is a monstrosity. That thing just runs. And now I'm just going to disable this. Let's see if it helps. Oh yes, it does. Okay. Let me just get there we go. Okay, that's up and running. So that was the case. Good to know. So the old issue is still there. Well, that's pretty much the issue with the application, not with the game. But we are getting 120 FPS, no, over 100 FPS at least, so it would be running over 100 FPS anyway, which is, I would say, pretty close to the 8 Elite already. And frame generation does work, well, for the most part. If we ignore the bugs, it works, but I wouldn't really recommend it to turn it on unless it's a 8 Elite. But let's play a little bit more. I mean, I'm here to show you how it will work, potentially, at least on this device. Yeah, I'm already personally more than happy with the current performance. Obviously, I would expect this to land on the older devices as well, because the older devices also support it. 90, 100 FPS, okay, not bad. 120, it does go down to like 89, but if your goal is to just get above 60, then, you know, this is going to be already phenomenal, because the FPS would guaranteed be above 60 all the time. Okay, that's decent. That was actually some good FPS, not gonna lie. The temperature is also a little bit higher than usual. I mean, it's to be expected. The GPU is, after all, working a little bit harder. And as I mentioned in the past, the 8th Gen 2 definitely has the horsepower for 120 FPS Wuthering Waves. So I would love to, I mean, if you go and look at other tests, you would see claims that these devices have a weak GPU and that they can't even get 60. This kind of proves that that's false, and this kind of proves that you can definitely get 120 FPS, or at least over 60 FPS on all the generation Snapdragons. And again, it just proves that the main reason why this game wasn't running that well on Android is the software, the API. I've been saying that for months and months, and recently all of the things that I've mentioned, as I already expected, all the things I mentioned is true. And I would say with a little bit more time, you can definitely expect much better performance on older hardware. And then all the testing has been made has to be redone, because it would be on an equal playing ground with the new API and with the with all the issues fixed, or all the issues being fixed. All the things would be on an equal playground, and that would pretty much mean that with better software, well, with better API basic, you will get better performance as expected. Well, still good FPS. The 8th Gen 2 is one of the most efficient chipsets out there. The 8th Gen 2 is currently also one of the most price to performance valued chipsets out there, and if you're looking for a cheaper device with high performance, I would definitely recommend to find a cheap 8th Gen 2 or 8th Gen 3 device, depending on the price. Preferably 8th Gen 3, because I know there's some fantastic devices that are cheap with the 8th Gen 3 chipset, and if they are too expensive, then 8th Gen 2, but I would personally, if I had to make a recommendation, currently 8th Gen 3 and 8th Gen 2 could be the most two cost-efficient chipsets with the best performance, because they can be as cheap as $200 $200 and stuff like that. So you get some insane performance for a very small price. So that was the frame generation performance on the 8th Gen 2. It works, but it is very buggy, as we have all seen today. But it works, and I believe Kuro will enable this option for these older devices as well, because they do support the AFME, or the Adrenal Frame Motion engine. Now, let's go and do the only Vulkan test now. I had a little guess that maybe Vulkan on this device will perform better than Vulkan on the 8 Elite, because I have the theory that the developers are focusing more on the 8 Gen 2 and 8 Gen 3 and older devices than they're focusing on the new ones. And if that's the case, I'm personally fine with that, because the 8 Elite isn't as common at the moment, and it's, let's be real, the 8 Elite is expensive, and most players have 8 Gen 2, 8 Gen 3 and lower, so naturally it is fair that they are focusing on those older chipsets a little bit more. So let's see how Vulkan will perform on the 8 Gen 2. Funny, because I wanted to do this on this device originally, but I've done it on the 8 Elite first, because I had a little accident with One UI 7.0. Anyway, what happened, doesn't matter. So, everything is adjusted. Okay, sorry for my fingers being in the way. I'll remove them. I mean, I removed the fingers from the screen, not from my hand. That would be pretty funny. Anyway. Okay, we are getting 58-60 FPS with Vulkan. And one fantastic thing that I can tell you already with Vulkan, at least on the 8 Gen 2, the overall heat output on this chip has been reduced by approximately 10, 15, 20%. Usually it tends to go up to like 90, 95 degrees Celsius in this case. Now it's about 53, 40, 65. It does sometimes hit all the temperatures, but only for a fraction of time. It doesn't really stay there too much, obviously. I have turned off frame generation because we don't want the flickering and stuff like that. We are just testing Vulkan performance now, so I only have Vulkan enabled. Already pretty happy with the heat output. It's much better. The stability seems to be good. It's at 50, I would say about 60 FPS. You experience a little dips here and there, but the dips aren't as noticeable as the dips that used to be noticed before. And the overall FPS and frame rate is definitely a lot more gentle, a lot more stable. Another fantastic thing, the temperatures are in this area lower. It tends to hit like 85-90 degrees in this area, especially when you go in the middle of the when the fountain is. If you go there, the temperatures to skyrocket for a moment, but now that seems to be gone, and the overall temperatures are lower. Well, can you experience the benefits of Vulkan on 8 Gen 2? Yes. The funniest thing is, we are actually getting better FPS on 8 Gen 2 than on 8 Elite with Vulkan. 8 Elite has about like 49-50 FPS max on Vulkan. Sometimes it gets to 60, but usually drops because it seems to be capped. We are getting 60 over here. So the 8 Gen 2's Vulkan performance beats that Vulkan performance of 8 Elite. Isn't that funny? Even though the 8 Elite has approximately 2.5-3 times faster GPU than the 8 Gen 2. Well, isn't that just funny, isn't it? But again, just kind of proves that developers did not forget the older chips, which I'm actually glad that they didn't. More love for the older chipsets needs to be done in these games. And that's coming from someone that has an 8 Elite. I mean, I'm fine with the 8 Elite, but I'm also fine if they focus on the older chipsets more. Because I would say those older chipsets definitely need the software a lot more. But yeah, the GPU is doing its job. The CPU, all 8 cores are doing its job. Temperatures are definitely lower. I'm actually very happy with the temperatures now. Much better temperatures than before, that's for sure. The frame stability is also better, but again, I have to mention this, even though it is seemingly working better with Vulkan right now, OpenGL has had more than a year in the game. Vulkan is like couple weeks old, I would say. I don't know when they exactly added it, but OpenGL definitely had more time, more development time in the game. And I would still not recommend Vulkan because it can be very buggy. But this is the current Vulkan performance that you can expect to get from a 8 Gen 2 device. It will be very interesting to see how the 870 will perform with Vulkan on this game, and how frame generation will work on a not supported device. That's a thing that I really need to see. That's a plan for the next season. But overall, right now the temperature looks good, the overall FPS looks better than 8 Elite currently, and the device is not even warm. So already a decent boost and decent increase from OpenGL. And again, what I have been saying for months and months and months on end becomes true. Vulkan is simply going to offer better temperatures, better heat, better overall thermals, and better performance. Even though it's far from perfect Vulkan implementation, I would say on 8 Elite it seems to be better than the OpenGL. If anything, the temperatures are definitely down, and I am happy with that. The FPS is also, I would say the FPS feels a lot more stable, though it does go up and down, which is normal, because I have set the update interval to be quite fast, which does show me when the dips are obvious, and it's important to see. I want to see the dips, the FPS dips. So far, it's pretty stable, I would say. A lot more stable than I have anticipated, because personally, I actually thought that it would be about the same as the 8 Elite. I actually initially thought that it might not even work, but good thing the API is universal. If 8 Elite supports Vulkan, obviously does support it, 8 Gen 2 supports it, 8 Gen 3 supports it, 870 has the same Vulkan, 8 Gen 1 has the same Vulkan, MediaTek has the same Vulkan, Exynos has the same Vulkan support. All of these chips that have the same Vulkan support, pretty much the same, exact same API. The only difference would be how the game will adapt them and how the game will implement them. That's pretty much the only thing to to consider and to keep in mind. But yep, good thermals, that's for sure. And the GPU load is also quite consistent, something that I would say wasn't really the thing in OpenGL. We will see that in the next phase of the video when I go and boot up the game with OpenGL. But yeah, definitely is going to breathe more life into the older devices, and I'm very glad, very happy that Kuro done the right thing. If we were to be completely real, they had their ups and downs. Anyone has their ups and downs. Kuro made mistakes in the past. They acknowledged it. We all acknowledge that. They apologized, and the most important thing, though, they done better. And currently in 2025, it's a little bit, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but unfortunately, it is rare to see a developer do that. Most developers, from my personal experience, would push the blame onto the player, push the blame onto your hardware, or just ignore the problem. But we have been sending feedback to Kuro for months. I know I've been sending feedback for months myself. I think you guys know that. I've been doing this test for a year. And step by step, they have time and time again proven that they do listen. Maybe some said that they listen a little bit too much. Maybe that's true. I'm not going to go into that, but the important things that have been mentioned have been addressed by Kuro. And that alone, makes me personally pretty happy with the direction of the game. Sure, there are problems. Obviously, not going to say the game is perfect, because let's be real, no game is perfect. We can find problems in any game that we pick. That's just a fact. If we criticize the game, we care about the game. If a player criticizes the game, is mad about the game, it just means that the player just loves the game. I know that from my experience. And I think Kuro knows that, and a healthy dose of criticism is always welcomed, because if we haven't been criticizing them, they wouldn't done better. So if there is a Kuro developer watching these videos, paying attention to what I do, then I would like to thank them for listening, because they are doing the right thing for the game, I would say. And so far, all of the core issues are being addressed. Sure, it did take time. Again, a year for Vulkan support, a year for all of the things, but I initially thought that we'll never see this day. I was wrong. I'm more than happy to admit that I was wrong. I thought that they'll never add Vulkan. I thought that we will never see proper performance on Android. I was wrong. We will see proper Vulkan support, and we will see proper performance on Android devices. And I will just have to thank Kuro for being awesome and for actually doing the right thing. Because we all know that a certain other game that I will not mention, we all know what game that is, did the exact opposite, and now that game is sinking while Wuthering Waves is reaching new heights. That's just all I'm gonna say about that. I don't like to compare them. I don't like to be. I don't like to do the thing where I just say when I just clown on the other game. I want to do that. I don't want to do that. I think I'm trying to be as professional as possible, and I try to address things as they are, and to be realistic. Basically, that's what I think I have been doing so far quite accurately. I hope I was, because it's pretty sad what happened to the other game, honestly. I don't want to see any game go down. Honestly, if I were to be dead serious, I would love all the games to just be successful, because that creates competition, healthy competition, and both games will have to do better if they want to, be relevant. And at the end of the day, what does that mean? we the player, we win. I mean, it's a win-win for us, really. We get to play awesome games. It's also a big win for the developers because they do create a good game that players love, and it's also a big win for them as well. So in general, what I'm trying to say here is, competition is healthy, and overall we all win from it. We advance together. That's the thing with it. But anyway, back to Vulkan performance here. As we see here, it's just working really well. Works better than on 8 Elite. That's a thing that I have to mention. Vulkan works better on 8 Gen 2 than on 8 Elite on this game. That's pretty funny. Am I mad? No, I'm not mad. I'm actually pretty happy that that's the case. So, as I mentioned before, all the chipsets need some love too. And Vulkan on the 8 Gen 2 is really good. Works really well. And from this point on, it can only be better. So, now it will be time to launch the game in OpenGL, and let's see how OpenGL will work in 2.3. Although, I don't know, did I do a test with... No, I did it with the 8 Elite, I did not do it with the 8 Gen 2. Okay, it's time to see how it will work on 8 Gen 2. So, we are back to OpenGL, and first thing that we will notice, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think we all know what's next to happen. Temperature. Now, with OpenGL, this chip does get quite warm. 95, 85 degrees Celsius, whole chip 95 degrees Celsius per core. The 8 Elite knows to get warm. The 8 Elite's overall total maximum temperature is higher than the maximum temperature on the 8 Gen 2, which is normal. You should not be scared of these numbers because these numbers are all within the thermal range of the device, on both devices that I use. The maximum temperature for the 8 Gen 2 is 95, the maximum temperature on the 8 Elite is 105 degrees Celsius. Above that you can get damage, but below that you're fine. So yeah, 100 degrees Celsius, the 8 Elite can handle that. And 95, the 8 Gen 2 can handle that as well. So, everything is back to original, and now we will see how the game will work. Now let me just get the proper time here, just to make things as accurate as possible. So, the temperature is the first thing that we will be taking a look at. So, the issue with OpenGL is it creates a lot of CPU overhead. Basically, it is using the CPU for things that the GPU could be used, and overall it does not utilize all 8 cores. It does have a very odd load allocation on most of the games. One core 100%, second core at 80, 70%, third core at 50%, and so on. So you get a overall unstable load allocation, and you also do get, and that pretty much creates excessive heat, bad FPS overall. It creates a lot of issues with the game, and we immediately see quite a increase in temperature, to say the least. We're looking at maybe 15 to 20 degrees Celsius increase on the total CPU temperature. The FPS is about 60 FPS. It does hit 60 FPS. I would say the stability feels about the same, although OpenGL will stutter a lot more because, again, of the CPU overhead. It does create a CPU bottleneck, as I like to call it. But overall, FPS is still good. On the Vulkan and on OpenGL, you will get the same FPS, about the same FPS. The only difference is stability and heat output. The Vulkan performance and heating is definitely better than the heating that we see on OpenGL. We are at 88, 85 total CPU temperature. The GPU is at 71. And it's pretty much the temperature that you will expect from OpenGL on 8 Gen 2. Meanwhile, the Vulkan did hit 71, 72 maybe, about that, I would say, in this area. But for the most part, it was under 70, 65, 69, nice 70, and then stuff like that. Overall, nice temperatures. So, for the overall heat output, Vulkan definitely does a much better job on the 8 Gen 2, even though Vulkan isn't fully done well, you still can get the benefits of Vulkan on Wuthering Waves with a 8th Gen 2 device. I mean, I would say the thermals alone are a good reason to go for Vulkan. I know we all don't like our devices getting warm, and it's definitely a lot easier to cool these things down with Vulkan and with OpenGL. That's simply a fact from my experience. I've done hundreds of tests with this game, with other games, and the overall result in OpenGL versus Vulkan was the same. And even, I mean, it's also just as a good example, even with quite a primitive build, quite a experimental build of Vulkan, you can still get exactly the same performance, maybe a little bit better performance, better stability, and much less heat than with OpenGL. That's been the primary API for the game for over a year now. So I think that alone should kind of point out how good Vulkan can actually get. Yes, this thing is now getting warm. Okay, now we're talking about some good heat. Well, good heat in this case, it doesn't mean good heat, it means excessive heat. Anyway, let's go and do some combat. If you've been paying attention to the CPU temperature there, it is over 80 all times basically. Will that damage the device? No, it can handle the heat just fine. I've been using it for 3 years, no issues, and it's been heating this all this time, so you know you can expect that it's normal. But yeah, this is a thing if you look at older tests, I always said that the overall maximum FPS isn't really the big issue now. It is the inefficiency in rendering, which Vulkan will solve, and as we have seen in this test, Vulkan definitely did solve, or if not I can't say that it completely solved it, because it's not fully utilized, I would say, but it is definitely on the road to completely solve the heating issue. I mean, you can say that it's solved because the temperatures are definitely drastically lower, but because it is not implemented that you can switch normally, then I must say that we're getting there, but in the grand scale of things, we all know that it solved it. I think you guys will understand what I'm trying to say here. And let's do some combat. So yes, that temperature now getting... Yep, that's what I remember from OpenGL on the 8th Gen 2. So, kind of to start finishing up with things here, I think the result of today's test is what we all kind of expected it to be. Vulkan on the 8th Gen 2 seems to perform better than Vulkan on 8 Elite on this game. That does not mean that Vulkan itself is bad on the 8 Elite. That's definitely not true. The 8 Elite currently supports the latest version of it, and it's currently literally the most powerful mobile chipset on the planet. So the 8 Elite is a beast on its own. But in this game, in the way the software has been implemented, it seems that they have been paying attention more to the older generations than on the new generations. So it seems that the older generations will benefit a lot more from Vulkan than the new generations, which kind of does bring us to the feedback again, because a lot of players have been sending feedback to Kuro regarding the Vulkan on older devices. And based on this, I would say they actually looked at that and they took that seriously. I would say this could very well be direct confirmation that they have looked into it and that they have primarily focused on the older devices with performance. So that's another win for Kuro and for us. So I have no reason to be angry, I have no reason to be mad. I can just be happy that we are having a very good developer that does the right thing. I cannot believe that I'm sitting here looking at the game and actually seeing legit fast improvement based on the feedback that I and a lot of other players have been sending them. It feels surreal though, and it's also at the same time a little bit sad because you don't see this often, and that's why I'm sticking with Kuro games for so long, because time and time again, I tell you, time and time again, man, they are surprising me, and their games are awesome. Their games are also very awesome. So I am truly happy that I'm actually able to enjoy these games, and obviously happy with the developer team. I would say the overall Wuthering Waves community is overall very happy. I would say it feels nice to be part of it. It's not overly negative, and the negative things, depending on what things they're focusing on. I mean, if it's a valid issue, players do voice concern, that's fine. But there is also a lot of other things that I feel like are dumb, and those also get kind of pointed out. So I feel like the game is in safe hands, and overall in a very good direction actually. Well, some interesting heating going on there, as expected from OpenGL. I mean, I could just end the test right here. We are nearing the end of the video. Well, that was a coincidence. In any case, that was the Vulkan versus OpenGL performance test on the 8th Gen 2, and also a frame generation test on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with the results. Vulkan seems to work really well on the 8th Gen 2, and I'm happy about that. And as always, you tell me what you guys think about the test. Tell me if you try this out on your device, how it did run on your device, and what device you have, what chipset you have. That's also important and interesting to know, so that we can have a complete picture of what works, what doesn't work, how it works. And with that being said, if you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. I plan to do a lot more tests with a lot of different devices. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.